You think you're in control, but look closer. There's a subtle thread that's always pulling you. Even when you believe you're holding the reins, there's a reason you double back to her profile at midnight. A reason your chest tightens when another man looks at her. A reason you smiled, even when you shouldn't have. It's not about her. It never was. The truth is, there's a desire inside you that you've never named, not out loud, not even to yourself. It's not weakness. It's not lust. It's not even about sex. It's the craving to matter. To be seen, not just by her or them, but by something greater, something ancient. You see, in Nietzsche's eyes, men don't desire what's pleasurable. They desire what validates the story they're secretly telling themselves, and every man has a different story. Do you remember the first time you wanted something you couldn't have? For Alan, it was in the 10th grade. A quiet girl with black eyeliner and a chipped tooth. She read poetry when no one watched and never laughed at anyone's jokes. She didn't want to be wanted, and that made her magnetic. Alan didn't desire her. He desired the feeling of being the one who could break through her silence, but she never let him in. What haunted him for years wasn't the rejection. It was the part of himself that felt invisible, and how she reflected it back at him, wordlessly. And that's how desire works. It's not about who or what. It's about why. Why do you chase what you chase? Why do you keep returning to the same type of woman, the same fantasies, the same failures? It's because you're not chasing them. You're chasing the version of yourself you think they'll finally let you become, the confident one, the powerful one, the man without fear. But here's the trap. What you want is often the very thing that enslaves you. The moment you say, "I need this to feel whole," you've already broken yourself in two. Nietzsche called it the inversion of value. When men mistake submission for strength and obsession for passion, it's the reason power feels sexy. The reason control feels divine. But you don't want her. You want what she gives you permission to feel about yourself. And that's where the danger begins, because if she leaves, if she chooses someone else, if she sees through you, then what are you? Do you even know? This is where most men live, in that quiet space between wanting and being owned by the want. The illusion is this: you think you're chasing her, but really, she's the mirror, and you've been running toward your own reflection. The moment you catch it, it vanishes, and you're left with nothing but the ache. That ache is the truth. Desire is never about possession. It's about escape. Escape from shame, from insignificance, from the deafening silence of feeling unseen. You bury it with bravado, with flirtation, with muscle, with money, with the perfect line at the perfect time. But it always comes back, not as a thought, as a pull, a tightness in your chest, a breath you hold without realizing, a glance that lingers half a second too long. And that's what no one tells you. Desire doesn't start in the body, it starts in the wound. The deeper the cut, the louder the hunger. You want to be chosen, but what you really want is to choose yourself, without needing her eyes to prove that you matter. That's the first step, but that's only the surface. The real danger hides deeper. A word count, 1015. You ever hear a voice that doesn't sound like yours, but it says exactly what you were trying to ignore? It doesn't shout, it doesn't argue, it just whispers. Whispers when you're about to text her again, even when you told yourself you wouldn't. Whispers when you see someone else win, and something bitter stirs. Whispers when you lie next to someone, and still feel alone. That voice isn't madness. It's the shadow you've been trying to outrun. Most men never meet it. They feel the symptoms: jealousy, obsession, fear of rejection. But they never trace them to the source, because the shadow doesn't show up in daylight. It waits. It waits behind the smile you put on in front of her friends. It waits behind the voice you lower to sound confident. It waits behind every fake yes, every polite no, every nod that hides a scream. Nietzsche understood this better than most. He didn't say to conquer your darkness. He said, make peace with it, because if you don't, it will speak for you. It will make your decisions for you. It will choose your partners, your patterns, your pain. There was a man I knew, Tomas, sharp, funny, charismatic in a room, but every relationship he touched withered, not because he was cruel, but because he didn't know how to stop performing. He had perfected a version of himself that women loved, but none of them ever saw him, because he never showed them. And late at night, after the laughter was gone, the silence whispered something cruel. If they knew the real you, they'd leave. He carried that thought into every kiss, every smile, every goodbye. That's the voice of the shadow. It doesn't hate you. It remembers you. It remembers the first moment you decided it was safer to be liked than to be real. It remembers the heartbreak that taught you to smile through betrayal. It remembers the night you stared at the ceiling, feeling like a stranger in your own body. And every time you feel that tightness in your chest, that sudden, unexplained wave of rage or fear, that's it speaking again, not to hurt you, but to be seen. You see, your desires, they're not random, they're fragments of what you've buried. The woman who makes your heart race, she might remind you of someone you couldn't save, or someone who didn't save you. The craving for dominance. Maybe it's just a child who felt small for too long, the obsession with being chosen. Maybe it's not love you want, but proof that you're finally enough. These whispers, they don't stop, you just learn to speak over them. But when you do that long enough, you forget which voice is yours. You become a stranger to your own mind, reacting, numbing, chasing, never asking why. And that's how the shadow wins. It doesn't have to take over. It just needs you to forget it's there. That's why Nietzsche warned us, not about evil, but about forgetting. Forgetting what you've denied, what you've repressed, what you've hidden under success, sex, and silence. Because the longer you forget, the more control it has. You think you're making choices, but how many of them are just reactions to old wounds? How many of them are just echoes of something you never dared to say? Here's the truth. You can't kill the shadow. You can only listen. And when you do really listen, you'll hear the truth beneath the whisper, not weakness, not shame, but a boy who never got to speak, a man who never got to feel, a heart that never got to grieve, and maybe, just maybe, a voice that sounds like yours again. But that's only the beginning. There's something darker just beneath that silence. Word count 1065. What if I told you that pleasure isn't freedom? What if it's the most seductive prison ever built? You chase it, success, validation, affection, control, because the world told you it would make you feel alive. But it never lasts, does it? The high fades, the text stops coming, the attention shifts. And suddenly, you're right back where you started, only emptier. It's because the system you've been taught to trust was designed to keep you chasing, not fulfilled, just hungry. Nietzsche called it the herd morality, a system built not to free the individual, but to keep him useful, obedient, predictable. And pleasure is the leash. Look around. You're told to follow your desires, indulge them, express them, be free. But there's something off, isn't there? If you're so free, why do you feel trapped? If you're doing what you want, why does it feel hollow? You scroll, you swipe, you consume. But every action feels like a transaction. Give part of yourself to feel something for a second. That's not freedom. That's a loop. a loop dressed as liberation, like a dog let off the leash, only to find the yard still has walls. Pleasure used to mean something sacred. It was rare, it was earned. Now it's immediate, endless, disposable, and because it costs so little, it gives even less. There's a man I remember, Victor, late 30s, well-dressed, polished. Always surrounded by people, he had charm, success, and access, but every night, when the music died down and the last drink hit the table, his eyes went somewhere far away. He told me once, "I feel like I'm performing desire, not feeling it." That stuck with me, because that's what happens when pleasure becomes a habit, not a hunger. You stop feeling. You start faking. You smile when you're supposed to. You laugh on cue. You touch when it's expected, but inside, you're just waiting for it to end. You think that next woman will save you, or the next business win, or the next compliment. But what if the very act of chasing is what keeps you broken? See, pleasure isn't evil, but when it becomes the point, you become the pawn. Nietzsche didn't say don't feel pleasure, he said, understand what it costs you. Every pleasure you indulge without thought weakens the part of you that waits in silence, the part that sees beyond the moment, the part that can say no, the part that can sit with discomfort and not beg to be distracted, because that part, that's where real power lies, not in the chase, in the stillness. The man who can sit in silence without needing a screen, a touch, or a drink. He's dangerous because he's free. But you were trained from birth to run from silence, to fill every quiet space with noise, every ache with dopamine, every pause with stimulation. So when silence finally arrives, it terrifies you, because that's when the truth speaks. And what it says is not always kind. It tells you that she never loved the real you, just the version you showed her. It tells you that your confidence is borrowed from validation, that your strength is a mask for your fear, that the empire you've built is a castle of mirrors, reflecting nothing back. And that's when the panic sets in, so you run back to the apps, back to the drinks, back to the dopamine, and the leash tightens. You think you're choosing this, but every algorithm is engineered to keep you numb. Every product is designed to keep you small. Every promise of pleasure is a soft whisper saying, don't look too closely, just feel good. But when you finally do look closely, you see the bars. Not steal, comfort, convenience, distraction, and worst of all, you built them not because you're weak, but because no one told you there was another way. So here it is. What you mistake for freedom is often the most invisible form of control, and pleasure without purpose is the most addictive chain of all. But the real question isn't whether you're addicted, it's whether you're ready to stop pretending you're not. Because the next layer is darker. It's the moment when pleasure stops satisfying and starts devouring. Word count 1078. There's a moment, quiet, often missed, when a man first feels the sting of shame. It doesn't shout. It doesn't bleed. It just lingers, like smoke in the corners of your mind, like a glance you didn't mean to give, like a truth you weren't ready to see. Shame doesn't come from what you want. It comes from what you hide, because what you want is human, but what you pretend not to want, that's where shame takes root. It starts early, when you're told some feelings are too much, too loud, too soft, too needy, too aggressive, too real. So you split yourself. You keep the parts that get applause, and you bury the parts that get silence. But buried doesn't mean gone. It just means you've trained yourself to flinch when you feel too deeply. You joke when you're nervous. You talk over the truth. You laugh at what hurts, and you call it strength. But deep down you know it's a performance, a fragile act held together by habit and fear. There was a man I used to meet at a quiet boxing gym, Andre, tall, intense, hands like stone. He carried his past in his silence. Women wanted him, men respected him, but no one knew him. One night after sparring, bruised and bleeding, he sat beside me and said, "I haven't cried since my brother died. That was 18 years ago." I asked him why. He didn't answer, just stared at his hands, like they weren't his, like he didn't trust what they'd do if he ever let go. That's what shame does. It builds walls, it silences grief, it turns softness into fear, and fear into rage. But here's the truth. The thing you're most ashamed of is often the key to your freedom, not because it's noble, not because it's beautiful, but because it's honest, and honesty is the only thing that cuts through the mask. Nietzsche didn't say to be virtuous, he said to be whole. Wholeness doesn't come from suppressing your darkness. It comes from standing in front of the mirror and refusing to look away. That mirror isn't made of glass. It's made of the eyes that disappointed you, the father who never saw you, the lover who touched your body but not your soul. The voice inside that whispers, "You'll never be enough." Most men break in front of that mirror. Some shatter it, some turn away, some spend their lives trying to be what they think the mirror wants to reflect. But you're here, still looking, still listening, which means there's something inside you that refuses to settle, and that matters more than you think. Because shame only has power when it's hidden. Once you name it, once you say, "Yes, that was me, that is me," it starts to lose its grip. It no longer defines you. It becomes a part of your story, not the whole book. And here's the part most men never hear. There's nothing wrong with wanting. There's nothing wrong with needing. There's nothing wrong with hurting. The only wrong is lying about it, to yourself, to her, to the world. You think that hiding it protects you, but it only protects the illusion, and illusions don't love you back. They don't hold you at night. They don't ask how you really feel. They don't look into your eyes and see past the armor. They just clap politely from a distance as you keep performing a life that isn't yours. So let this be the crack. Let this be the moment you stop applauding yourself for surviving in silence. You've carried the shame long enough. And not all of it is even yours. Some was passed to you by men who never healed, some by women who never saw you, some by a culture that profits from your disconnection. But now it's yours to face. And you don't have to conquer it. You just have to stop running from it. Because when you do, you'll hear something different behind that shame, not guilt, not fear, just a younger version of you, still waiting to be forgiven. But what happens when that shame doesn't just whisper, but begins to steer every choice you make? That's where desire turns into something far more dangerous. Word count 1059. Desire doesn't start with you. That's the lie. You think your cravings are yours, that you made them, that they came from choice, from will, from something honest inside. But look closer. Where did you learn what's worth wanting? Where did you get the idea that this kind of woman, this kind of body, this kind of lifestyle would make you feel like a man? Who sold you that? Because someone did. Maybe it was the movies. The hero always gets the girl, never needs to ask twice. He doesn't sweat, he doesn't doubt, he just takes. Or maybe it was school, where the ones who got attention weren't always the smartest or the kindest, but the loudest, the tallest, the most ruthless. You noticed. And without realizing it, you adjusted. You learned how to move, how to smile, how to hide the parts of yourself that didn't win the room. That's when it began. Not desire, but programming. you weren't chasing what you wanted. You were chasing what the world rewarded, and it felt good, because every time you got closer, every text back, every nod of approval, it gave you a little hit of worth, a little echo saying, yes, keep going, you're almost there, But almost never ends, it just becomes addiction, and now you don't even ask what you want. You just chase the high, chase the body, chase the validation, and you call it desire, but it's not. It's hunger, engineered, conditioned, refined over years until it felt like instinct. But instincts are ancient. This isn't ancient. This is curated by algorithms, by culture, by everything that profits from your insecurity. Nietzsche saw this clearly. He warned that most men don't live by their own values. They inherit them. Like a sickness passed from one generation to the next, and the tragedy, they never question it. They just obey, blindly, loyally. Even when it kills them. There's a man I knew, Reed. He spent 10 years chasing a version of himself he saw on a billboard. Suits, women, power, perfection. He got close. The job, the penthouse, the car, the parties. But one night, after a party he didn't want to be at, with people he didn't trust, he looked at his reflection in the tinted window of a car and said out loud, I don't know who this is, and not out of drama, not for effect, just emptiness. He'd been chasing someone else's dream for so long, he forgot how to wake up, and that's what happens when your desire is inherited. It turns you into an actor in a play you didn't write. You know the lines, you hit your mark. You smile at the applause, but when the curtain drops, you feel nothing, because none of it was yours. Not the woman, not the life, not even the voice in your head, just noise you memorized well enough to pass as real, and now you're tired. But you don't know why, because success is supposed to feel good. She's supposed to make you feel chosen. This version of you is supposed to feel powerful, but it doesn't, because deep down you know it wasn't built on truth. It was built on reaction to what you were told, to what you feared, to what you thought they wanted from you. But what do you want? Not from her, not from them, from yourself. Most men can't answer that, because no one ever gave them the space to ask, and without that space, desire becomes something that uses you, instead of something you choose. So here's a question. If you stripped away the noise, the likes, the roles, the praise, the images, what would still feel real? What would still make your heart move? That's the beginning of honest desire. But most never reach it, because the noise is louder, easier, more addictive. But if you do reach it, you'll feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Not excitement, not lust, stillness. And in that stillness, a deeper truth rises. You were never weak for wanting. You were just never taught to want clearly. But that clarity, that's where everything changes. Because once you see the manipulation, you can't unsee it. And once you stop mistaking hunger for truth, you begin to see how desire can quietly become the weapon that turns back on you. Word count 1069. It always starts small, a glance that lingers just a second too long, a message sent at midnight, a quick thrill that makes the silence in your chest feel a little less heavy. You tell yourself it's harmless, just a release, just chemistry, just something to take the edge off. But you don't notice how often you reach for it. Not at first, then one day, you do it without thinking, not for pleasure, but for relief, and that's the shift. The moment desire stops being a choice and becomes a reflex, it happens to more men than you think. And it rarely looks like addiction from the outside. You show up, you smile, you function, but inside, there's a hunger that never closes. A loop that never ends. You feed it, but it never says thank you, it only asks for more. And every time you give in, you feel less like a man in control, and more like a passenger in your own life. Nietzsche called this eternal return. Not just the repetition of events, but the repetition of the self, the same thoughts, the same patterns, the same regrets over and over, until your life becomes a script you didn't write, performed for an audience you don't even trust. There was a guy named Malik, creative, quiet, thoughtful. He used to paint, now he scrolls, used to write. Now he drinks. He doesn't know when it happened, just that, at some point, the chase became the cage. He told me once, "It's not even that I want them, it's that I don't know who I am without the wanting." That's what no one tells you about desire. It doesn't just pull you towards something, it can replace you. You begin as the chooser, then you become the chosen. Then you become the slave, and slowly, the thing you chased becomes the thing that owns you. It's not even about her anymore. She's just the symbol, the screen you project your emptiness onto. What you really want is to feel alive, to feel powerful. Desired, needed, seen, but when that feeling becomes a fix, you lose yourself chasing it. You stop asking why. You stop noticing the cost. You stop recognizing the face in the mirror, and the scariest part, you don't even care. Because desire, when it mutates, doesn't just dull your logic, it dulls your dignity. You start accepting things you swore you never would. Start ignoring red flags. Start bending, folding, breaking, just to feel something, even if it's empty. Even if it hurts, even if it eats you from the inside out, and it always does. Because unexamined desire doesn't stay harmless, it grows teeth, it rewires your brain to equate wanting with worth. And then, without meaning to, you start measuring your value by attention, your masculinity by conquest, your identity by reaction, and if no one looks, if no one texts back, if the night ends in silence, you feel like you disappear. That's not desire, that's dependency. Nietzsche never feared pleasure, he feared unconscious repetition. He feared the moment you stop choosing and start performing your wants over and over because it's the only script you know. You ever felt that, doing the same thing you know will leave you hollow, but doing it anyway? That's not weakness, it's a warning. Your instincts have been hijacked. Your desire has been repurposed, not for truth, not for intimacy, but for escape. And escape is seductive. It always is, but it costs you your self-respect. Every silent compromise, every ignored boundary, every time you gave more than you meant to, just to feel less alone. The hunger doesn't stop, it just changes faces. And eventually, you're not chasing pleasure anymore, you're feeding the monster you swore you'd never become. So ask yourself, when was the last time you said no, not to her, but to the part of you that would burn everything just to feel needed? Because that part, it doesn't want freedom, it wants fire, it wants to be consumed, but the man you're becoming has to make a different choice, because what's coming next isn't just about desire. It's about how far you'll go to protect the illusion of control, even when it's already gone. Word count 1054. He didn't mean to lie, not really. It started with small omissions, a glance he didn't mention, a message he deleted, a shift in tone when she asked how his day was, and then one day he realized he was living two lives, the one he performed and the one he protected. It wasn't even about her, it was about the space she filled, a hollow he never admitted existed. He used to think honesty meant not getting caught. Now he knows it means not hiding from yourself. There's a moment in every man's descent when he sees the line and steps over it anyway, not because he's evil, not because he doesn't care, but because the ache inside him feels louder than his conscience, and silence starts to feel like betrayal, too. The kind no one notices except him. He tells himself he still has control, but slowly every choice feels like it's already been made. Like he's watching his life happen from behind glass. She texts, he replies, she flirts, he leans in. She smiles, he forgets everything he swore he'd protect. And when the moment comes, the one he swore he'd never let come, he doesn't say no. He doesn't say anything, just breathes, justifies, and disappears into the feeling afterward. He lies awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to pretend he still recognizes himself. He tells himself it was just a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, that what she doesn't know won't hurt her, but it does, even if she never finds out. Because it's not just about what happened, it's about what broke. Something in him shifted, something quiet, but permanent. He can still laugh, still hold her hand, still look her in the eyes, but now every smile has weight, every kiss has a question behind it. Because deep down, he knows she trusts a version of him that no longer exists. He wants to be that man again, wants to go back, undo, unfeel. But time doesn't move backward, and guilt doesn't forgive just because you're sorry. There's this idea that men who cheat are monsters. But most of them, they're just tired, lonely, lost, afraid of being invisible, and in that fear, they reach for something, someone, that makes them feel real again. But what they don't realize is that in chasing that feeling, they trade authenticity for illusion, and illusions always collapse. Nietzsche once wrote, "I am not upset that you lied to me. I'm upset that from now on I can't believe you." And that's the real cost, not the act, but the fracture, the quiet, invisible shattering of something sacred. Trust, not hers, yours. Because when you betray someone who loves you, you don't just lose them, you lose the part of you that believed you deserved them. And rebuilding that isn't about apologizing, or proving, or pretending. It's about facing the man you became. In the silence after the damage, looking him in the eyes, and choosing, every damn day, not to be him again. But most men never get that far. They bury the truth, lie to themselves, numb the guilt, and keep walking toward the next escape. Until one day, they look in the mirror and see a stranger looking back. You ever felt that? Like the life you're living doesn't match the man you thought you'd be. That gap between who you are and who you pretend to be, that's where the pain lies. And no one can close it for you, not her, not love, not forgiveness, only you, and it starts with this. Tell the truth, not just to her, to yourself, because until you do, you'll keep living two lives, and the one that matters most will keep slipping further out of reach. Word count 1016. There's something strange that happens when you live with a lie. At first, it's loud, it hums under your skin. Every word you speak feels wrapped in caution. You listen closely for questions, for suspicion, for cracks. But after a while, the lie gets quieter. It blends in, becomes part of the rhythm of your days. You wake up, make coffee, kiss her cheek. You laugh at the right moments, hold her hand in the supermarket. You say, "I love you," and sometimes you almost believe it, because routine is a powerful mask. It lets you hide behind normal, behind the image of a man who hasn't shattered something sacred. But when you're alone, in the quiet moments, when no one is watching and there's no one left to convince, the truth crawls back in. That's when it hits you. how much you miss the man you were before you let desire win. It wasn't just a moment, it was a shift. A letting go of something that once held you steady. You thought desire was a fire, something to feed, or fight, or ignore. But what if it's not? What if it's a mirror, not showing you what you want, but what you lack? The problem isn't the wanting. The problem is what you do with the emptiness it reveals, because the ache doesn't go away when you act on it. It deepens, spreads. You don't just lose her trust, you lose your own clarity. You start to question everything. Was I ever happy? Did I ever love her, truly, or was I just afraid of being alone? And those questions, they're harder to outrun than guilt. Because guilt can be hidden, disguised, turned into silence or apology or self-pity, but doubt, it lingers, it waits. It poisons the moments that should feel pure. You find yourself pulling away, not because you want to, but because you don't feel like you deserve to be close. You talk less, touch less, avoid her eyes when she says your name. She feels it. Of course she does. She may not know why, but she knows something's changed. And here's the cruel truth. You want to come back. You want to return to the man who held her without guilt, but you don't know how. Because honesty, after betrayal, isn't a door you walk through. It's a wall you have to break. Brick by brick, with no guarantee she'll be waiting on the other side. And still you build, because maybe redemption isn't about being forgiven. Maybe it's about proving to yourself that you're still capable of being worthy, that you're not just the sum of your worst decisions, that there's still a part of you, even if it's buried, bruised, barely breathing, that remembers how to love with both hands open, no hiding, no secrets, no escape routes. Just truth, uncomfortable, ugly, but real, because real is the only thing that can heal what you broke. So you sit with the shame, you let it sting. You stop trying to justify, you let her ask the questions, you answer them honestly, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts, and you stop pretending it didn't happen. You stop rewriting the story, because until you do, you're just building your life on a fault line, and one day, it will crack again. Maybe that's Nietzsche's darkest truth. Not that desire leads to ruin, but that when we refuse to look at what it reveals, we bury ourselves in ruin disguised as comfort. Desire isn't the enemy, delusion is, and the only way out is through it. Through the silence, through the guilt, through the cold nights where you wonder if you've ruined the best thing you ever had. You probably have. But that doesn't mean you can't build something honest from the wreckage. It won't look like what you lost. It won't be as easy or light or innocent, but it might be real, and real, no matter how scarred, is better than perfect. Because perfect is a lie you can't live inside, and truth, when you finally stop running from it, might be the only thing that can hold you together. Some mornings, you wake up before the alarm, and for a brief moment, before memory crashes in, you forget what you've done. The sunlight doesn't accuse you, the air feels clean, you reach across the bed, and then you remember she's not there. Not because she left, not yet, but because you've made the space between you too wide to cross in your sleep. You wonder if she's awake. You wonder if she's watching you pretend. You wonder when pretending became easier than truth. You get up. Make coffee. The mug you bought together on that weekend trip still sits in the cupboard. You pour the coffee in anyway. Like muscle memory doesn't care about guilt. You sit, you drink, you scroll, headlines, noise, distraction. But something nags at the back of your mind. Something Nietzsche once hinted at. That the worst pain is not inflicted by others, but by the self we abandon, the self we betray. Desire was supposed to be the spark. The thing that reminded you you were still alive, still wanted, still more than a man in routine. But it didn't bring you back to life, it hollowed you out. Now, when she walks past you, there's a flicker of something you can't quite name, not hate. Not love, it's quieter than both, it's a question, unspoken. Can we still find each other in this fog? She used to laugh when you mispronounced that word, used to touch your arm just because. Now she watches you like a stranger she once met in another life. You don't blame her. You wouldn't trust you either. You try to speak, but how do you say, I chose wrong? How do you admit that the thing you chased wasn't freedom, but escape? The problem with escaping is that you always end up alone with yourself, and that's the part no one warns you about. Not the fallout, not the heartbreak, but the silence that follows, the silence where you're forced to ask, was it really desire? Or was it fear wearing a prettier face? You remember something Nietzsche wrote, he who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster. Maybe the monster isn't some external force, maybe it's the part of you that lies. That takes and justifies, that calls it need when it's really avoidance. So now you sit with the monster. You look it in the eye, you don't fight it, you learn from it. You learn that desire doesn't have to destroy, it can also illuminate. Reveal the cracks in the foundation, expose the rot, not to shame you, but to offer a choice. Do you patch the wall and pretend nothing happened, or do you tear it down and build again, brick by painful brick? You know which is easier. You know which will cost less, at least in the short term, but easy doesn't interest you anymore. You've done easy, you've done selfish, you've done secret. Now you want something else, even if it's harder, even if it's slow. You want to look her in the eyes and not flinch. You want to stand in the ruins and say, yes, I burned this down, but I'm still here. And I'm willing to rebuild, even if it takes the rest of my life, because love, the real kind, isn't about always choosing right. It's about choosing again, even after you've failed, even after you've fallen. Especially after you've fallen, that's the paradox. Desire breaks you, but it also reveals what you value enough to fight for. And sometimes, what you value isn't what you thought. Sometimes it's not the thrill, but the quiet. Not the chase, but the return, not perfection, but presence. So you take a deep breath, you look at the door she's behind. And for the first time in a long while, you knock. She opened the door slowly, as if the weight of everything between us had settled into the hinges. Her eyes met mine, not cold, not warm, but alert, like someone bracing for a storm they've weathered before. I didn't speak right away, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew words alone wouldn't fix it. And yet, they had to start somewhere, so I said the only true thing I could, I'm sorry. She stood there, still, her hands at her sides, her shoulders slightly drawn back, not with anger, but with restraint. She was measuring the moment. Not for drama, but for truth, and she asked, quietly, sorry for what? It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't laced with bitterness. It was a request, a dare, maybe, to look at myself fully, no hiding, no dressing things up in philosophy or blame. I breathed in, then said, I'm sorry for leaving you while still standing next to you. For choosing silence over honesty, for calling it confusion when it was really cowardice, for hurting you and pretending I hadn't. A pause. A flicker in her expression, like something shifted just a little, beneath the hurt. We stood like that, me in the hallway, her in the doorway, until she stepped aside and let me in, not into forgiveness, not into the life we once had. but into the present, whatever it held. The living room looked exactly the same, but felt different. Like a place waiting to be claimed again. She sat, I followed. We didn't touch, we didn't rush. Instead, she said, you don't get to rebuild just because you regret. You rebuild by staying. By listening, by showing up when it's inconvenient, when it's boring, when it's hard. I nodded, not because I wanted to agree, but because I did, fully. Painfully, she leaned back, folding her arms. Do you even know what you want, or is this just guilt? The question pierced me, but guilt wasn't enough to bring me here. I told her it started with guilt, but it became something else. A need to be whole, not just redeemed, a hunger for the truth, even if it costs me comfort. She didn't answer right away. She looked out the window, where the light was beginning to soften, evening creeping in. I thought about Nietzsche again. How he warned us not to destroy ourselves in pursuit of desire. But maybe the deeper truth is that we don't just chase pleasure, we chase meaning. And sometimes, meaning emerges from the wreckage. I told her I wanted to know her again. Not as the woman I once married, but as the person she became in the absence of my presence. I wanted to hear her anger, her silence, her new boundaries. I don't want you back, she said softly. I want me back. And I don't know yet if that version of me can include you. It was honest. It was fair. I sat with that. I let it settle into my bones. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't try to make her feel safe. I just stayed in the discomfort, in the truth. And that was the beginning, not of us, but of something real, something earned later. As I left, she didn't hug me. She didn't say goodbye. She just said, we'll see. And that was more than I deserved, but maybe just enough to begin. Desire doesn't always lead us to pleasure. Sometimes it drags us through guilt, silence, and loss before we see what truly matters. We chase what we think we want, only to arrive at who we've become. That's the strange beauty of it, how longing can break you open, and in that brokenness, something real begins to form. I don't know what will happen between her and me. I'm not pretending there's a clean ending. Life doesn't tie itself in bows. But I know this. I finally told the truth, and I finally listened to hers. If there's anything I've learned from this, it's that sometimes the most radical thing we can do is stay in the discomfort, stay in the uncertainty. Stay long enough to hear what we've been avoiding all along. Maybe that's what Nietzsche meant. Maybe desire at its core is not about possession, but about transformation. So now I'll ask you, what have you been avoiding? What truth do you owe yourself or someone you love? Don't wait for the perfect moment. It won't come. Just begin, and if this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of a moment, a person, or a silence you still carry, share it. Like the video, leave a comment. Let's talk about it. Let's be honest, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories to tell, because healing begins where the truth is finally spoken.